What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I know that as CEOs, we are always thinking about how we can be our best selves and how we can show up every day in a way that helps our company grow and thrive, right? And we're always thinking about how we can get our people to bring their best game every day so that our companies can grow and thrive. And so that's why I brought my new friend on the show today to talk to us. His name is Dan Pontefract, and he's a pretty terrific guy. I first met him when he was speaking at the Ace Tech conference this past April. I happened to be there with all of my friends at Ace Tech, and he was speaking, and I was really wowed by what he was saying because it wasn't the same old, same old. I hadn't heard it before put this way. And so I really loved his presentation on work-life bloom. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. And I just thought, wow, this is something I really want to share with all of you. So Dan is not only a thought leader, but a storyteller. And he's a lot of fun as well, which, you know, I like that. So he's bringing us a fresh perspective today. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Oh, Alice, you are so kind. You're a gem in an ocean of noise. Thank you for the invitation. Can't wait to chat with you today.
It's just super fun to have people like you on the show where I know we can really provide just a lot of great information for CEOs. But before we dive right in, just tell everybody, like, what is it you do for companies?
Ooh, it's sort of like a pie graph, you know, like where we met. Sometimes I might be able to go into an organization and just do a keynote or a couple workshops, etc. That's about half the time. The other half, I'm kind of a consultant for hire, and I'll help them with leadership modeling or helping sales executives become better versions of themselves in order to motivate and to be better stakeholders with their partners and their customers and clients, et cetera, and kind of fill in the blank. So it's a little bit of a Magnum PI role that I play from time to time with organizations.
But always helping companies better themselves, which I just love, right? So important. And CEOs really, you know, have their eye on doing that. They don't always know how. That's why they need our help.
Right.
Right. So today I want to kind of dive into what do CEOs need to know, right, to bring their best game and to help others bring their best game? And really, what do all humans need to know, right? And I think this concept in your book, Work-Life Bloom, is really an interesting one because you really frame it up differently. People talk about work-life balance, and then some people say, oh, there's no such thing as work-life balance. And then, you know, we hear all of these different things. But what's interesting to me and what I thought was new and fresh was that we all go through cycles and we continue to go through them our whole lives. So let's start there and talk about what do CEOs need to know about this?
CEOs, well, you could sort of change the acronym of CEO is to care and execute in organizations, right? Like we need to balance both. There's no such thing as you've rightly pointed out, Alice, in work-life balance. But when we know as executives we have to execute, that's job number one. But we have to be thinking through the care component. What does that mean? I mean, there's care of self. There's care of your clients. There's care of the sales team. There's care of the organization. So rather than thinking that you're the chief of execution or chief executive officer, I really think that the acronym needs to be rethought and how we think about care and execution on behalf of the organization and its many different stakeholders. So we start there. I think CEOs ultimately have to also recognize, which you've aptly pointed out, that they, their spouse, their family, their community, and the organization they lead are full of people who are humans. And if we think as an executive that our organization ought to have, I don't know, like 90% employee engagement scores, or that we should somehow set a target that all of us feel that we have executed on work life balance this year and that we are totally balanced, it's just such a flippant facade. Like it's just
Right.
the wrong metric. So I believe that those are wrong. Let's start there.
Okay. I like that because we got to get rid of these old ideas that aren't working for us anymore and bring in some new ones.
I think so. I mean, we thought that command and control was a good idea, partly because of Taylorism in the early 1900s, right? That went into the World Wars, World War One and Two. That really solidified command and control, which basically meant that after 1946, the way in which we operated was to tell people what to do. And then we kind of evolved a little bit, I would say, right? We're like, maybe Alice, collaboration and care, a little bit of empathy and communication might be, proactive communication might be, I don't know, helpful, motivating, whether they're
Mhm.
sales executives or whether they're marketing people or whether they're in IT or engineering, whatever. Maybe there's a humanity piece here to play. So let's just pretend we're still evolving, and we are. I think where we're at societally is we've got organizations, particularly large consulting organizations, with mentioning names. I'm very happy to call out the culprits. So the, the Gallups of this world, the Aon Hewitts of this world, like the large HR consulting firms
Yeah.
who have, and I use this word purposefully, Alice, duped us that we should be measuring things like employee engagement and work life balance. And when we measure it, we are expecting the measurement, to be high. And when we are not high as a CEO on the metrics of engagement or balance, then we think that our organization is inadequate, that our people that we're leading, that the culture is wrong. And what I argue, at least in my research, is that stop,
Yeah.
stop, because humans have ups and downs. And I'll challenge any CEO listening to this to an arm wrestle and suggest to you in that arm wrestle that I can tell you that you have been all four personas that I've researched at some stage in your working life. And these personas, where the Aons, the Hewitts, the Gallups, the Blessing Whites, the Great Place to Work people, who have all us figured out to think as a CEO that everybody should be highly engaged, Alice, that everybody should be on top of their balance game all the time. I mean, let's be honest. Like, things happen at work and life. So let's dumb it down a bit.
All
So
right.
Alice, if an organization and a CEO went out and acquired a company, and they've now acquired whatever 2,000 people, of which you've got 200 salespeople, you got 100 marketing people, you got 7 people in HR, and so on. Right? Let's just play this out. Those 2,000 people that have come over to the acquiring CEO's organization are probably freaked out, wondering what their new boss is like. Do I have to move? Do I have a job? What happens next year after the acquisition closes? And next thing you know, they're going to cut costs. Like, these are human emotions.
And they're right, they're human emotions and they're somehow going to impact that person. Some
Yeah.
maybe more positively and some maybe more negatively.
Yes, that's exactly it. So there's a work example of just one. I mean, we could talk millions of different permutations of work things that happen, from not just acquisitions, but product launches that went wrong, to clients that you've worked with for 3 years that retired. And now you've got a new rep or a new VP on the other side of the table. You're like, oh my God, I used to work with Alice. She was so amazing. Now I've got Ralph. Ralph is a jerk. Oh my God, how do I make this deal work? We're doing the re-up now. Like, oh my God, how do I work with Ralph? I'm freaking out. So you can see that these permutations are ups and downs and anywhere in between, like Alice, it's rhetorical, but I know you'll answer for me. Like, do you not think that affects that executive, whether it's a CEO or a COO or a CRO or an account rep? You don't think it affects them?
Yeah, it affects everyone, really. It affects the people around us that are our peers. It affects the people who report to us, and it affects the people we report to.
Bingo. So that's work. Now, as last time I checked, I've got a beautiful wife. I've got 3 kids. I have a life. I like riding my bike. I go on vacations. I buy groceries. I like going to grocery stores. I like palming around. I guess that's my jam. So I have a life. But there are times in which, in my life, particularly my individual recognition of myself, like who am I and how am I operating in this thing called life, that I do bring these attributes and qualities to work. But like I may not be on my game in life. I may not feel as though, for example, that I have the right skills at this point in my life. Maybe I need to re up my skills. I'm questioning my ability to do stuff. Maybe I'm going through a divorce. And all of a sudden, the rock I had in my life, I unbeknownst to me, found out that my spouse is like leaving me because she or he found some other person. I'm like, oh, God, that's a gut blow, right? So we're going to bring that to work. And if we think as CEOs that we are not some mashup between work and life, and that all these human emotions actually positively and potentially negatively can affect the performance of us at work, we're as naive as thinking that Rubik's Cube will be the best seller at Christmas this year. Like, it's just insane. So I have issues, Alice.
Yeah, I understand. It is, it's always complex when we're dealing with humans. I mean, they
Totally.
have feelings and their worlds work however they work, and we can't always control it. So, understanding ourselves first, that we're a mix of work and life, and that we bring to work things that are happening in our life. They impact us. Some people are better maybe at separating some things than others, but it's going to impact us in some way, and it's going to impact our work, like you said, negatively or positively. I mean, for some people, when things are going bad at home, they just focus on work and they're real productive and they get stuff done because that fills them up where they're missing something else. On the other side of it, sometimes negative things happening at home can make people just have a lot of feelings and things that prevent them from being able to focus and get their work done. And the same, of course, with anything that happens at work. I mean, we had a situation the other day with a CEO who didn't mean to, but didn't make it any better, pretty much berated one of the senior executives in front of everyone else. Oh gosh, do you think that impacted that person's work the rest of that day, week, maybe even month until they got that figured out, right? So I think that there are so many things that impact humans that we don't realize. We just figure, hey, they should just sit down at their desk and do their work and do their best job and then go home. But that is just not the way it works. So let's talk about some advice. Like, let's talk about, well, actually, let's go to, before we hit the advice, let's go to, so what is this? How can we understand these cycles better? I know you have, some process around this. How can we understand these better? And then what's some advice for how we can manage all of this? Because yeah, at any given day at your organization, there's going to be some people focused and doing their work and some people who aren't, but we still have to grow and thrive.
Yeah. So I guess before tactics, here's the way in which to go through, kind of almost like as a CEO, an assessment on yourself, an assessment perhaps on your directs, but then just to keep in mind that the rest of your organization, whether it's the sales org, whether it's the R&D org, wherever, people exactly us are a combination of what's happening with them between work and life, which is why CEOs really ought to be thinking about their organizational composition, meaning where are people at? And again, I think the bearing the lead comment is that if you're a CEO, is it okay to not be okay in certain points, or are you just going to be a maniac and berate people? So to your point of your exemplar there. So think of a 2x2 matrix, first of all, like I guess any any author that writes management books at some point has to have a 2x2 matrix. So this particular book has one. And this is pretty simple, right? On the left axis, which is the y-axis, think of that as work. And on the x-axis, that's one at the bottom, that's life. And what I guess, purposely went and tested is this work-life conundrum. And so if on the y-axis, the one on the left, work at the top is just amazing, let's call it. So work is like going swimmingly well. There's no bureaucracy, there's no politics. We collaborate, we're proactive, we're kind, we trust, there's a strategy, it's communicated and it's followed up on. Like all these work things that are actually going well makes you feel well as a human being in the organization as an employee. So then CEOs, unfortunately, dear CEOs, also have to recognize that people are humans. And on the life side, that might be very clear who I am as an individual and the things that are going on in my life, or sort of on the bottom left of the 2x2, I'm confused. It's like awful. It's like somewhere in between. It's like, So that's your work life XY axes. And what I've discovered is that instead of trying to get everyone to be engaged or balanced, you have to recognize where they're at. And this requires, like, just to give a soft shout out to a tactic, open dialogue with your people. Like how you, not just a, like, an American or a Canadian, how you doing, and you move on to the next thing. It's like an actual, no, seriously, how are you? Like, what is it that's going right and wrong? And maybe we can dig beneath the surface a little deeper. So what are the personas? Like, spoiler alert, instead of thinking balanced or engaged, up in the top right, so when work and life are going both swimmingly well, you're what I call blooming. And what I discovered in my research is that at any given time across the planet, because I did this assessment twice with about 20,000 people now, whether you're a leader or non-leader, the average is about 40% of us are, quote, blooming, where the factors in work and life are actually going positively well in both. So that means 60% of the time we're not. And again, that's okay if we're having conversations with people about what's working and what's not. So in the top left of the 2x2, that's when work goes well and you're kind of like questioning a little bit about yourself as a human being, as an individual. I just call that budding. So you're budding. You're kind of like in the dirt, but not quite popped through yet. You got a little bit of spark of a green pellet coming through or so, right? A leaf maybe. On the bottom right, when work, it could suck, but there could be some questions, right, about work. But life, you as an individual human being, you're good. You're like, yeah, I know my malice. I'm cool. I know my relationships. I've got meaning. I'm well. Like, my well-being is great. Well, maybe you're stunted. You're stunted because you need a boss who's asking questions of you. And maybe it's a CEO of, well, what's getting in the way of work being superb? So you're kind of stunted here. You need some watering. Like, you need some sunlight, so to say. And then the bottom left, when both work and life are like miserable, so to say, you're in renewal. Not you're setting fire to the building. You're in renewal. That means that you do have to have a conversation, ideally, about what's getting in the way. And this is where CEOs can be the caring and execution organizational individual, like that leader. So ultimately, 4 personas. I've been all 4. I know, Alice, you've been in all 4. I have been in all 4 in one organization as an executive, where over a 6-year period, I realized, doing the math backwards, and I worked for SAP, I was like, oh yeah, these eras, these situations, these acquisitions, when I moved to Europe, when I had to move back, like just things like that, all of a sudden you're like, I have been in all 4 and I'm still here, Alice. So as a CEO, as a CEO, tactic number 1 is to sort of say, all right, recognize there's no such thing as balance, no such thing as everyone being engaged. It's impossible. You'll have people on your team and right across the organization being in all 4 personas at all one time. And maybe they evolve or devolve over the course of that year or the next year or the following 5 years. So recognize that. And then second, what are you doing to have an open, empathetic conversation with your directs about where they're at and why? And if there's any inhibitors in the way, is there something, even just as a CEO coach, you can do to help that person? Or are there bureaucratic tactics, things in the way, just whatever the case may be on the work front for sure, that you might help that individual overcome.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, it seems so simple. So why aren't we just doing it? But let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh, I got
So,
ideas on that too. Yeah.
yeah, right? I mean, CEOs are busy. They have a lot of demands of their own, work-wise and family-wise, life-wise, right? And a lot of the CEOs I know probably don't know how to have a conversation with their directs that's going to get to the meat of things. I think they keep things pretty superficial, or maybe they're even friends, but to actually have that conversation, like, how are you? No, no, really, how are you? And how can I help? So how do we get CEOs to be able to do that?
Well, a couple things to think about if you are indeed listening or watching and you're a CEO. First of all, you're human. You bleed red. Like, you're not that important. We're all human beings on this planet, and there's only one way off the planet, and we all know what that is. So let's recognize who we are. We're just human. Number two, people look up to you because of the title. And when you show that reverence, when you show that empathy, when you show that unconditional understanding that, yeah, you're human too, like your director, you, the individual, when you actually use the role and the pulpit of a CEO as a force for good on the motivation and the education and the understanding of that team and where you're trying to go organizationally, that they are part work and part life, that they are human and employee at the same time, we're on to something. Number three, by example, I'll give you one. So I work with a CEO of about a $3.5 billion insurance company. Um, we'll call him Mark. and and what I love about Mark is that anytime he has um, a meeting with a team. So that could be a skip level, that could be his directs, that could be a offsite with 200 people, whatever the case may be. So what he does is he listens intently on what's happening in that meeting. So it could be 30, 60 minutes, could be half a day. And what he does is he picks out somebody who has the courage to speak out or to say something or just to be normally part of a business meeting, right? Sort of jots a little note down to himself after the meeting finishes. Right after the meeting finishes, he will either go over to that individual privately or phone them up because if it's virtual, of course, right? And he'll say, "Look, Alice, I got 10 minutes for you. I just want to provide some feedback that is constructive and positive about what I saw and observed in that particular situation." And it's all about love, effectively, care, right, for the human being, so that it's not micromanaging, it's providing coaching feedback and all the things that went right, and just maybe some things to consider because Mark is CEO of a $3.5 billion insurance company and people are looking up to him. So, my point being, Alice, when we abdicate humanity, when we abdicate responsibility to care, when we abdicate our understanding that people have work and life mixed up and mashed up together as a CEO or senior leader, and we think that it's just going to happen miraculously by some other means, then we've forgotten what it means to be a CEO and a leader.
Yeah.
It's a muscle. You not only have it developed in your youth, you have to continue to develop the muscle. And the analogy, of course, is if we don't coach and care, we'll atrophy as a leader. And when you atrophy as a leader, I assure you the trickle down effect is the people below will fall from those elements of maybe blooming to certainly permanently being in either budding, stunted, or hopefully or not, but in renewal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we tend to think of these things and with the word culture, right? You had mentioned that earlier. Oh,
Mhm.
there's something wrong with the culture,
Right.
which may not necessarily be true. It may be that the CEO is needing to bring this humanity back in, or all of the senior leaders, really, because especially in bigger organizations, all senior leaders play this role. But in the smaller companies the size that I work with that are usually under 100 million in revenues, and they don't have huge HR teams. Maybe they have like one HR person or two, right? Who can help certainly with all of this. But I think it sort of has to be first in the CEO's mind that this is the way we're going to do things, right? And then to the senior leaders or anyone else who can help, that they're going to have this approach to humans, that they're going to reach out to people unexpectedly with some positive feedback and observations of things that they've done well. And then, yes, if there's something that, hey, and consider doing this next time or try this kind of thing, that's great. Because I think what happens far too often is when we are reaching out unexpectedly, it's about something negative.
Yes.
It's not about something positive. And so people are like, oh no, the CEO wants to talk to me. Yep. And that is like a feeling that is a punch in the gut. So I think that if we do what I call catch them being good,
nice,
and make a little deal out of it, oh my gosh, I love the way you handled that in the meeting today.
Exactly.
When you said this, it really made me smile because I heard the customer or the project team or somebody, say this, and they knew that you were listening and that you understood them. And, that is what I consider a really high quality call. Do that again. How often are CEOs doing that?
Well, you touched on something probably just before my long-winded soliloquy on some tactics, but you said, we know that CEOs and senior leaders are busy and they're crazy busy. And I want to come back to your comment because I think that's exactly part of the rationale or reason why it's not happening. This humanity, this kind of care and coaching that you and I are onto right now. Let's be honest. I mean, any CEO when I work with or senior leader and look at their calendar, I mean, it is just chock-a-block. And there's a lot of responsibilities in these senior roles. And they're the fancy $10 word is peripatetic. Peripatetic means they are just darting from one thing to another. Sometimes they're fires, sometimes they're thinking moments with acquisitions or client meetings, whatever. We get it. Like, you're busy. You're crazy busy. You got to the chair and the role for a reason, I assume, not by nepotism, but that you got there by performance and past performance. So what CEOs forget is that it's the old, God bless him, because I get the privilege to work with him on occasion. It's the Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. And meaning, if you think that what got you to the chair of CEO is going to help you become even a better CEO by doing the same thing, rinse and repeat, then again, you're just not going to be a leader in which that your team and perhaps your clients look up to. So the Mark example, or air quotes Mark, that individual was promoted from within, who came into the organization as a COO, and the board really loved their work and promoted that individual to CEO. What he did as COO is different in terms of his conduct as CEO, meaning, like to the sort of example I gave and that you did some really good top up on, these kind of 10, 15-minute post-meeting sort of follow-ups with these individuals is not something he was doing before. It's something that he adopted as a CEO, and he wanted it to be pervasively known systemically across the organization that this is part of his CEO style, that it is a caring, coaching, constructive feedback, positive feedback. Hey, I really liked what you said in this moment, kind of CEO. And if we have, it doesn't have to be just that example, by the way, and you know this, Alice, but it's what are other ways in which you can look at your calendar and say, where are the micro moments as a CEO where I can provide that care and that coach and cultivating a culture there? Then you get a trickle down effect of everyone actually doing a little bit more with empathy, a little bit more with cognitive, emotional, sympathetic empathy. That is thinking what they're thinking, feeling what they're feeling, and doing something about it. That are the micro moments CEOs really end up and wind up enriching the culture because of that trickle down opportunity. Everyone starts seeing the CEO do those micro moments of care. Guess what? I bet you it starts taking fire. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can arrange your calendar. And one of the things that I always urge CEOs to do is do what only you can do, what you are best at, and what you love and get the rest off your plate.
Nice.
So you can be a good CEO, right? So you can really rise above and be better than just good, right? But if you don't take the time to get that stuff off your plate that you're not really very competent at, you just do it because you've always done it, or you do it because you're afraid somebody else won't do it, or whatever your reasons are, get that stuff off your plate and do the things that only you can do, that are your unique ability, that you're best at, and that you really love doing, because that also helps you stay in your best place more often, more of the time, right? So that you can show up. And then, thinking about sales teams, CEOs always want their sales teams to perform, right? And they always want them to perform better and better and better. Understood. But if you think about this work-life bloom and each of these individual salespeople as humans, somewhere in those quadrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about how you can impact that and how their leaders can impact that. This modeling of the type of behavior you're talking about is so important, because what do we do when sales are down as CEOs? We're like, oh, sales are down, everybody get out there, and we're kind of pounding them in not a very nice way sometimes, right? And we're putting pressure on the leaders, we're putting pressure on the salespeople, and it, doesn't feel that great, right? But that's important. We have to do it because people have to hit their goals. They need to know we're serious. But imagine if that was tempered with this kind of touch that you're talking about, where they heard you do the CEO heard a great sales call, or the CEO heard a compliment from a customer, or the CEO reached out to a customer with these very positive thoughts. That would make a big difference, and it would help to balance the times when we got to be a little tougher because, we feel like it's motivating somehow to be tougher. I'm not really sure how that all works, but, sometimes we feel like we have to just kind of put the hammer down so people will work harder and hit their goals. We need to balance that, temper that with these reach out moments where it's like, I saw you do this. That was terrific. And do it again, do that good stuff again, because then maybe I won't be in a position where everybody isn't hitting their goals and I feel like I have to bring the hammer down again.
Yeah, it's so funny you use the metaphor of a hammer and bringing it down, because what I find CEOs and senior leaders often forget is that the hammer is actually usually part of a toolbox. And if the hammer, Alice, is the only tool in which we use, and we're not using the sponge or the sandpaper or maybe a Phillips screwdriver every now and then, there's some duct tape in there, right? There's string, like there's a bunch of things. And if you metaphorically continue that, analogy, so to say, the point is, if you're only using the hammer and you're looking for a nail, and your nail are the people who aren't performing, and if it's like you think it's all the time, or you're only hammering when you found the nail and the nail is underperforming, you're not meeting your targets, then what does the end result, the flip side, is the employee, the account exec, whomever, feels as though the only time you're talking to me is when I'm underperforming, or I'm not in one of the other three personas, right? I'm not blooming. I'm, again, stunted or budding or in renewal. And the irony out of all of that, of course, right, is that is the most demotivating thing. And so you're piling on demotivation by demotivating more. Like, it makes no sense to me. You should be coming at it from the exact 180 opposite, so that these connections, this humanity piece, people want to go the extra mile for you, for the organization, for the client in times of duress. But when it calls for the hammer, fine, I get it. I'm not naive. But when the hammer's only used, then I have a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I talk to a lot of people about customer experience. Tiffany Bova is one of my favorite people to talk about customer experience with. But we want our employees to provide an excellent customer experience, right? But how can they do that if they're not having an excellent employee experience?
Exactly.
Right?
I have this, I have a diagram I use in some of my work, and it's an infinity loop, right? Infinity loop. On the far left of the infinity loop is EX, employee experience. On the far right of the infinity loop, inside the loop, of course, is CX, client customer experience. And in the middle, I put you. So that could be CEO, that could be the account exec, could be a leader, doesn't matter who. We are the fulcrum,
Yeah.
right? As a CEO, we are the fulcrum in the middle there. If we're not equally and habitually fixated on the relationship between EX and CX and only one or the other, good God, like, this thing is going to fall apart.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't, right? So again, everybody can't be blooming all the time, and that's okay, and we need to make it okay. And to get them more towards blooming, we have to be able to talk about what's going on for real so that we can help them move past that and get towards blooming again, right? And if we are providing that experience for internal customers, which are our employees, such that they know they're going to hear the good stuff. And yes, when they need some constructive criticism or feedback, they're going to hear that too. But it's tempered with the good stuff. Because look, on any given day, the humans who are working for you do many, 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 many more good things than bad. Right? Like, they get to work, they get stuff done all day long. And then maybe one thing happens that's not so great, right? Or sometimes it's really, really bad. But if you pile up all the good stuff, it's a huge pile, right? Compared to the stuff that's not going well. But we somehow we just forget about all that good stuff and just, focus on that negative thing. And it's terrible for humans to have that. And our brains want to do that anyway, because they're kind of wired to the negative just because of, how we've evolved, right? We were chased by saber-toothed tigers. We better learn that negative thing, right? Don't do that again. So we're kind of wired that way anyway. So I think we really have to refocus if we want people to naturally move through all of those stages, but move back towards blooming when they can, right? We've got to reinforce the positive things because they do so many positive things. And I think that's what's going to get us that employee experience, customer experience balance. Because when those two things get out of balance, right, somebody's going to suffer. It's either the employees or the customers, and neither one is good. We don't want either side suffering. So I think as CEOs and as leaders, it is our job to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to show up as our best, even when we might be what's one of the other one? Not blooming, but budding.
Yeah.
I still need to show up as my best and help others do the same. And I just think more positivity, and especially in sales, gosh, it just drives me nuts how much negativity goes on in sales. And it's kind of a negative job anyway, because you got to talk to people who say no and aren't going to buy from you, or who ghost you, or, you can't get a hold of them, or whatever it is. So we need to add more positivity anytime that we can.
And and to complement all of that, I couldn't agree more, Alice. So going back to the calendars and the schedules, if executives, if CEOs aren't recalibrating their calendar so that they do have the time to provide that feedback and that coaching and that care, then the only time in which that they are available is to berate when things are going south and that the targets aren't met, or a client issue has surfaced, and all of a sudden it's just bad news, bad news, bad news. The psyche of the human being who is the account exec or what have you then gets diminished. And then we wonder why people leave our organizations. It's a cycle of insanity that I and you, I know, are trying to curb.
Yeah, definitely. We have to beat that cycle. It's a terrible one. But that made me think of something too with customers. Like, I have CEOs who feel like the only time they ever get brought in to talk to a customer is when something's gone south.
Right.
It's bad and they have to go in and fix it. And so if we gave them an opportunity more frequently to go talk to customers when things are happy and the customers are wanting to just gush about how great, everything is, that would balance that out too. And I think that is a big part of it, because if the CEO's involvement in sales is only on the negative end of things, when things go south with a customer,
Or
then
even this, Alice, like I love where you're going. And I would say that times the CEOs are showing up to help close a deal so that, the recurring revenue is there or the re-up is there, what have you. Just imagine, you're in the middle of a 3-year cycle. There's no issue. There's no discussion about re-up. It's just, 18 months into a 36-month contract, and you're just there with a basket of fruit.
yeah. Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
hey, just thinking about you. I know I'm the CEO. Tell me, like, how are things? I have no modus operandi here
Right.
to take any more money from you. I'm just here to see how things are going.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
100%. And sales leaders need to give their CEOs those opportunities. Provide them with, hey, here's a customer you could just call out of the blue and say some nice things to her. Here's a customer who has some compliments. I'd like to have
Yeah.
you meet with them. But
Yeah.
get those positive moves in there. CEOs, ask your team to help you have these positive interactions with customers, right?
Just make sure you arm the CEO with the account plan. Make sure they're well versed, right? But yes, I agree totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally, get them ready for any meetings they're going to have, all the prep in the world, but provide them with these opportunities to have these positive interactions. Oh my gosh. Well, I could talk to you about this all
I
day.
was just gonna say, I like hanging with you. This is great. We should do a
I know,
weekly
right?
show.
We're going to run out of time. And I have to do my 3 questions though before we get off the line together. So I have 3 questions for you, Dan. I know you can answer these. All right, first question. What is a book that you think every CEO should read?
Huh. I think that I'm still a big fan of my friend Dan Pink and Drive. I think when you talk about mastery, autonomy, purpose as a CEO in this new era, I think I'm little DP, he's big DP. I think big DP is onto something, but was onto something almost 20 years ago. So that's a great read, Drive.
Yeah, I love Daniel Pink. His work is so poignant. I also like the way he writes because he gets to the point.
He does.
And it's
Exactly.
really good. So I highly recommend Drive by Daniel Pink also. And I highly recommend your Work-Life Bloom book because I think it really helps explain what humans are going through, what we ourselves are going through, right? First, recognize it in ourselves, right? And then what are the other humans around me going through, and how can I have an impact on that? So I'm going to recommend your book as well.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. What is a podcast you love because it makes you think differently? Doesn't have to be a business one. It could be anything you listen to that makes you think differently.
Yeah, it's done in Canada, but it's not about Canada. And it's called the Monk Debates. And so what MUNK debates, it takes an issue and 2 people debate from both sides. And it makes you think, whatever the issue is. It might be DEI, for example, and 2 people come out from 2 different ways. And it's just incredibly well done. And you can decide which way you shift, or you might enjoy both. So the Monk Debates is a great podcast.
I am adding that to my list because I love things like that. I love to dive into both sides. I'm one of those people who can really see both sides of things, and I like to hear what others have to say about it. So I'm adding that one. All right, cool. Last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this marketplace?
I'm gonna use the aforementioned work-life bloom, and I think ultimately, when a CEO recognizes that from an EX/CX perspective, that we're all humans, and at any given time we're going to be a different persona because of the conditions in work and life. When you get past that and realize that, then I think you can have a more humane and humanity-driven understanding of a sales cycle and how your account reps, et cetera, have to be thinking about that sales cycle and how they are at in the sales cycle itself.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Dan, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm so glad that I met you last April. That was just really a blessing. And I'm just delighted that we've become friends. And I thank you so much for being here today.
Feeling is way more mutual than Alice. I just think you're a crackerjack, and can't wait to be face to face again. Thank you for such love and support.
Have a great day. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll